Here's a fact you probably learned as a kid and never questioned again. You have an organ inside you that does absolutely nothing. The appendix, a little dead-end tube hanging off your gut. No job, no purpose, a leftover from evolution that just sits there until one day it gets infected, tries to kill you, and a surgeon cuts it out, and you never miss it. That's the story. The useless organ. The classic example of evolution leaving junk behind. There's just one problem with that story. Over the last 20 years, it's quietly fallen apart, because it turns out your useless appendix may have had a job all along, and the evidence comes from a very strange place. The fact that evolution keeps building it over and over again in animal after animal as if it actually matters. Let's start with what the appendix actually is. Low on the right side of your abdomen, where your small intestine meets your large intestine, there's a pouch called the cecum, and hanging off that pouch is a thin, worm-shaped tube closed at one end. That's your appendix. Its full name, the vermiform appendix, literally means worm-like appendage. It's small, on average about 9 centimeters long, roughly the size of your finger, though it varies a lot from person to person. Some are only a couple of centimeters, some are much longer. It's narrow, only a few millimeters wide, and it's a dead end. Nothing passes through it. Food doesn't travel down it, it just hangs there. And for most of modern medical history, that's exactly how it was treated, as a thing that hangs there. Worse than useless, actually, because it's dangerous. Sometimes the opening gets blocked, bacteria multiply, and the appendix swells, inflames, and can burst. That's appendicitis. Before surgery, a burst appendix was frequently a death sentence. Today, it's one of the most common emergency operations in the world. Hey, take it out, you recover, and here's the key point. Everyone remembers, you seem completely fine without it. So put those facts together. A small tube, no obvious job, food doesn't use it, it occasionally tries to kill you, and you can live a totally normal life once it's gone. If you were handed that list and asked, is this thing useful or useless? You'd say useless. Obviously useless. Everyone did, including Charles Darwin. Darwin didn't just call the appendix useless in passing, he built it into his argument for evolution itself. In The Descent of Man, in 1871, he pointed to the appendix as a textbook vestige, a body part that shrunk down from something that used to matter, and he had a specific story for what it used to be. Look at animals that eat a lot of tough plant material, leaves, grasses, bark. Digesting plant fiber is hard, it takes time, and it takes bacteria. So many plant eaters have an enormous cecum that pouch the appendix hangs off, turned into a giant fermentation chamber where microbes slowly break down all that fiber. Darwin's idea was that our distant ancestors were leaf eaters with a big working cecum like that. Then, somewhere along the line, our diet changed towards softer, richer, easier food like fruit. The giant fermentation chamber wasn't needed anymore, so it shrank. And the appendix in this telling is the shriveled leftover tip of that once great organ, a useless remnant of a stomach our ancestors no longer needed. It's an elegant argument, and notice what it did for evolution as an idea. A well-designed body shouldn't have a dangerous, functionless tube in it, but an evolved body, a body renovated from earlier animals rather than designed from scratch, absolutely would. The appendix became Exhibit A for "you are not designed, you are inherited." For over a century, that was the settled view. The appendix was the most famous vestigial organ in the human body, useless and proud of it. And then people started looking more closely, and the useless organ started doing things. The first crack came from asking a simple question. If it's useless, why is it packed with immune tissue? Because it is. The wall of the appendix is dense with lymphoid tissue, the kind of tissue your immune system uses to monitor and respond to what's happening in your gut. That's a strange thing to find in an organ that supposedly does nothing. You don't heavily staff an empty building. Then, in 2007, a team at Duke University, Randall Bollinger and William Parker, put forward an idea that reframed the whole thing. To understand it, you have to understand what actually lives in your gut. Your intestines are home to trillions of bacteria, and most of them aren't enemies. They're essential. They help you digest, they crowd out dangerous microbes, they're part of how you stay healthy. These good bacteria form a living layer, a biofilm, coating the inside of your gut. Now, what happens during a serious gut infection? Something like severe diarrhea or cholera. Your body flushes everything out, violently, repeatedly, and that's good for getting rid of the invader, but it also strips out your good bacteria along with it. Your gut gets wiped clean. So how do you repopulate? Where do the good guys come back from? Bollinger and Parker's answer: the appendix. Its shape is the giveaway. It's a narrow, closed-end tube tucked slightly out of the main flow of traffic in the gut, exactly the geography you'd want for a shelter. When the main intestine gets flushed out, a reserve population of good bacteria, safe inside the appendix, can ride out the storm and then move back out and reseed the gut once the danger has passed. A safe house. That was the word they used. Not a leftover, a backup drive for your microbiome. Now, a clever hypothesis is one thing. What turns it from a nice story into something more is when it makes a prediction and evolution confirms it. Here's the prediction. If the appendix is genuinely useless, evolution should treat it carelessly. Useless things get lost easily. They come and go because nothing is holding them in place. But if the appendix does something valuable, evolution should hold on to it and should tend to build it again and again wherever it's useful. So a team led by evolutionary biologist Heather Smith did something ambitious. They mapped the appendix across the mammal family tree, hundreds of species. Who has one, who doesn't, and how those species are related. And the pattern was striking. The appendix hasn't appeared just once in one ancestor and been passed down. It has evolved independently many separate times by their count, somewhere around 30 times or more across mammals in lineages that are not closely related. And once a lineage has one, it very rarely loses it again. Think about what that means. Evolution keeps inventing this same little structure over and over in animal after animal and then refuses to let go of it. That is not how evolution treats junk. Junk gets dropped. This is how evolution treats something that earns its keep. And there was one more clue. The species that have an appendix also tend to have more of that immune lymphoid tissue concentrated in the cecum. The appendix travels with the immune hardware, which is exactly what you'd expect if its job is tied to defense and to managing gut bacteria. So the picture flipped. The single most famous useless leftover in the human body turned out to be a structure evolution, builds on purpose, keeps on purpose, and pairs with the immune system on purpose. But wait, if it's so useful, why can you have it removed and feel completely fine? This is where honesty matters, because it's a real objection, and the answer is genuinely nuanced. Part of the answer is the world you live in. The safe house function matters most when your gut gets catastrophically wiped out by cholera, by dysentery, by the kind of repeated devastating infection that was common for most of human history and is still common in places without clean water and modern medicine. If you live somewhere with sanitation, clean water, and antibiotics and probiotics on a shelf, you rarely need an emergency backup of gut bacteria. Your neighbor's microbes, your food, your medicine can reseed you. The appendix's insurance policy is one you may simply never have to claim. So you don't miss it doesn't mean it does nothing. It can mean you happen to live in a time and place where its job rarely comes up. And it's not quite true that removing it costs nothing. Studies have started to find associations. People who've had their appendix removed appear to have a somewhat higher risk of certain gut problems, including more severe infections with a nasty bacterium called C. difficile, which is exactly the kind of thing a bacterial reserve might help protect against. These are associations, and the research is still developing. I'm not telling you to keep an inflamed appendix. A burst appendix is far more dangerous than any of this, but it does fit the pattern. The appendix seems to be doing a small, real job, not nothing. Here's the honest state of it. The old, totally useless story is dead. The appendix has immune tissue, it looks built to shelter gut bacteria, and evolution treats it like something worth keeping. Exactly how much it matters in a modern, sanitized human life is still being worked out. It's useful, but not indispensable. Real, but easy to overlook. So here's the twist. This whole channel is about the body as an unfinished renovation full of leftovers, dead ends, and bits of old structure nothing ever bothered to remove. And most of the time, that's exactly what we find. The appendix was supposed to be the crown jewel of that collection, the most famous piece of useless junk in the human body, the organ that proved we weren't designed, and it turned out to be quietly employed the whole time. That's worth sitting with, because the appendix isn't really a story about one small tube in your gut. It's a warning about a word, useless. For 100 years, we don't know what it does, got quietly rounded up to, it does nothing. And that turned out to be a failure of our imagination, not a fact about the organ. The body is full of leftovers. That part is true. But every so often, the thing you were certain was a leftover looks up from the corner it's been sitting in and turns out to have been doing its job this entire time. So the next time someone tells you a part of you is useless, pointless, vestigial, just along for the ride, remember the appendix. We were completely sure about that one too.